Good morning, Bitcoiners. Good morning. Sunday morning. The sun is indeed shining today where I am. Was it too bright? Well, we had the daylight savings time, so you got a different blast of sun today. A different trajectory than we've been used to lately. We've been getting, from this vantage point, we've been getting the early morning sunrise. It's sort of just coming up before I go on air. You're getting the 1 hour in sunrise this morning. We may be back at the farm studio after the election. We might drive back on Wednesday. We may drive down to Nashville, Tennessee. We'll see. We're going to go meet some Bitcoiners. But indeed, the sun is up. I checked. Bitcoin's running. We can have our coffee and talk about the news. All right, lots going on. Perfect. So, daylight savings time today. Of course, the fake news had to run a story today on daylight savings time so this is apparently the last year in America we're going to have daylight savings time. They passed the law last year, and I think it takes effect next year. And from now on, we're going to stick with the summertime times. We're not going to switch in the winter. We'll see. I've heard that story before. There's a few states that said they did it. Apparently, it's going to happen this year. I'm in Canada now. I don't know if it's going to be synced with the United States. I bet. I don't think we're capable in Canada of sustaining an hour off from our American border areas very long anyway. It would get really confusing. And so I can't imagine. I mean, most Canadians still exist on a... they watch television in America. Not that the television schedule is that powerful any longer as it once was, but I think, sports, for example, right? I'm in Toronto. Are the Raptors going to play at 6 o'clock in the evening if they're playing against any New York teams? I doubt it, right? So I have a feeling Canada will have to comply. Good morning, Dex. So here we are. But of course, the MSNBC had to run a story that experts say that switching, that basically going to the one time in the year is also dangerous. They're saying that's really dangerous for us, experts, right? Now, imagine how, if it wasn't for COVID, we would still listen to these experts, and we probably would never have gotten rid of daylight savings time. We probably would never have gotten rid of it because people would have said, oh, experts said. And their reasoning was, and you've heard this a million times, that when we take this hour away in America from the morning, we give it to the morning right now and take it away from the evening, right? We give it to the morning and take it away from the evening. So we get 1 hour extra light in the morning, and we don't have that hour in the evening. So most people on the East Coast of North America from now on, this is very different from what Europeans are used to. I've lived in Europe, wake up with the daylight savings. In the winter, it's still 8 or 9 in the morning when the sun comes up. Here, the sun is up now at 7, right? 7. Yeah, experts actually say that daylight savings time cause massive health issues and disrupting sleeping patterns. Exactly. So they have gone on for years. They wrote the standard story every year, right? Every single year that we have daylight savings, that it's unhealthy. Experts are saying it's unhealthy. But now that it's about to switch, I saw one of these other articles saying the other way. So that's what I'm trying to explain. They're trying to say that we switched this hour, and the reason we did it was to give more sunshine in the morning for kids going to school. This was all made up recently. For kids going to school, because years ago there was some accidents and kids, unfortunately in the dark had trouble getting to school. But we have just as many accidents in the afternoon now with people driving home in the dark. There's no difference. It'll get dark here now tonight at around 5. Sunset is at 5 p.m. tonight, 5 p.m. And it's only going to get earlier from now on. It's just earlier and earlier, right until Christmas. Growing up around Christmas time, living in Montreal, it's 4:30 p.m. and it's pitch black out, right? It's pitch black. And for some reason, we need that hour in the morning, I guess. I don't know. So I think it's done. They tried to run a fake news story today saying, now the new change is different. We read for years from experts, right, that the other way was different. But look how differently it hits now. Look how differently it hits after COVID, right? We hear the experts say, and immediately you're just like, yeah, right. Experts, the experts. Oh, goodness, the experts, right? Would we ever talk like that if it wasn't for COVID? But especially Bitcoin, right? Because don't forget, COVID, forget the virus for a second, just erase the virus from your mind. A global disturbance that people need to be prepared for because the financial system was going to tank and all these other things. Bitcoiners predicted that, right? Everyone in Bitcoin who was there early, when we saw the reverse repo market in 2019, we said either the banks get actual financial discipline and the Federal Reserve actually tightens, or a major disaster happens and they have to print a bunch of money. We predicted that, right? Like, the only reason you haven't heard Bitcoiners bragging more was because there were dead bodies. There was all kinds of conflict about COVID itself, but Bitcoiners had it right. I've always said that the reason why Bitcoin Magazine and the Bitcoin 2021 conference was the first conference in the world, right? I'm in the conference business, right? Bitcoin 2021 in Miami was the first global gathering of anything, anywhere, coming out of the original COVID event, right? That's got to say something, that Bitcoiners were the first to get together, to meet in public, to meet in a room that had, 10,000 people at the time with no masks, right? That no one in the world was even prepared for that at the time. Bitcoiners were, because Bitcoiners, in many ways, forget the virus for a second, saw a global calamity coming. So we were right on schedule. So meeting in public was that much easier for Bitcoiners because Bitcoiners had predicted it. As we were in COVID, we were in the world that we had seen coming, right? We didn't know about lockdowns, but we knew about trouble, right? We knew about trouble. And therefore, it was easiest for us to intellectualize what was happening, adapt, and in the end, be the first to have physical connections again. It was a big deal, right? It was a big, big deal. I said it at the time. It was only appropriate that Bitcoiners were the first in the world to meet. It makes sense. You come out of the original lockdown, right? One of the first major activations of World War III. And there we were, the first out of the mess, right? The first on the beach, right? Just like at D-Day, the first on the beach, right? But it was Bitcoin time. So there you go. More fake news. So this one's really funny. So, it's a complete implosion now in the Democrat Party, right? We're not going to predict what's going to happen next, right? Because everything I hear from the Democrats these days is all projection. Like, all I hear is election going to be stolen, politics corrupt, save our democracy. So all I hear is we're going to steal the election, we're corrupt, and I just hear what they're saying, right? I heard what they're saying, right? So they're saying this is all going to happen. Democracy is on the ballot. You hear everyone saying it, right? Democracy is on the ballot. And if you don't vote a certain way, you're going to lose your democracy, I guess, is the logic. But everyone's going on with this talking point, and it ain't going very well. So the president was on the West Coast yesterday. And if you know, there's a hugely contested race in the United States in the state of Pennsylvania. Now, why that's relevant is Pennsylvania is filled with coal. It's like one of the great coal deposits ever anywhere on the planet, right? And it's been a coal area for a long time. And it's actually been a major swing issue in elections because, what are we going to do with the coal and the green stuff, the green energy and the wind and the solar and what's happening and all these things. So Biden was on the West Coast, but I don't think he knows that everyone can hear when he talks sometimes. So he says, we're going to shut down all the coal plants and we're going to replace it with electricity, right? So he wasn't in Pennsylvania when that happened, but of course it's a tight race. And now they got to talk about it in Pennsylvania, right? So big issue. And it had to be that the White House press secretary came out and had to explain, because he didn't mean what he was going to say. He's not going to shut down the coal plants. So this is very bad, right? This is a big problem to have said, right? Because again, they need that seat in Pennsylvania. They can't afford to lose, must win. So, so he says this, you're going to shut it all down. And then the press secretary, Karen Jean-Pierre, comes out and, issues a statement. Now, blah, 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 the statement, right? He didn't mean it, but we are, doing energy transition. We're going to have this new form of energy. And it's true, some things aren't going to be the way you thought, but we're committed to you. And it was just a bunch of fluff, right? Never did she come out. It was a bit like, remember how we analyzed Kyrie Irving's apology yesterday? And like the apology was missing, right? He could have made it go away. I get why he doesn't. We're not getting into it, right? But you could feel within the letter that the point of the letter was just to get around the actual action of apologizing, right? We're going to talk more about Kyrie and Kanye later today, but that's what happened. Here she comes out and says the same. She just tries to talk for 2 paragraphs to say, I didn't mean it, it's all going away, right? But it did nothing. It did nothing, right? She put out a statement for damage control, but it sounds exactly like what the president said. They're going to shut down coal plants and tough luck, right? So the apology just confirmed what he was saying. She tried to put the explanation of morality on it, right? We have to do the global warming thing and the world's going to die. And it's going to be so sad and all this stuff. But it didn't go anywhere. So Oilfield Rando, if you don't follow Oilfield Rando, you got to. He's great, right? Just a great account. And he says, I can't help thinking about Biden staffers when I'm picking up my dog's poop. Because he's just going around basically, crapping himself, the president, right? Oh, coal. Like it couldn't be a worse problem. Politically, it could not be worse to say that, right? So there he is saying it. And they got to clean it up. It's pretty funny. But as I said, it's going really, really bad for the Dems. There's not much going right. Even the Atlantic yesterday, right? The Atlantic, owned by Steve Jobs' widow, and she paid whatever billions for it, and it's become one of the most intellectually bankrupt institutions in America. This is a magazine that was like hot on the heels of covering the Civil War. Like they're that old, right? They were a real respected magazine for a long time in the United States, and now they hire all kinds of people that you wouldn't think should be in a respected magazine. But here's a story they published today about, so there's 2 other elections for governor that are also going to break Republican. One of them is in Georgia, the state of Georgia, where a woman named Stacey Abrams has been running and complaining that the election was stolen from her in 2018. And so it's been 4 years of complaining that the election was stolen. It looks like she's going to lose again, right? So there's no chance it looks like she's going to win. The other one is Robert O'Rourke, otherwise known as Beto, right? Beto with a skateboard. So Beto tried to run for president. He's tried to run for Senate against Ted Cruz. He had like all the donations to run against Ted Cruz. But, he's a typical kind of trust fund candidate, right? He doesn't really have a lot going on upstairs. Doesn't look like it's really connecting, and really speaks in some of the blandest, most vanilla language you've ever heard. Like an AI could easily replicate. If he just, God forbid, something happened to him and, he was gone, you could recreate him with very elementary AI because of the amount of fluff that comes out of his mouth. So here's what The Atlantic says, right? They said they have to stop. So they're already doing the inventory of why they're going to lose, the Atlantic, and they're putting the blame on these 2 candidates. And their headline is, Dems have to stop picking losers as candidates. That was the problem. They picked losers. They picked losers. Here's what they say. American politics doesn't have... so what they're talking, they make a comparison to a Japanese racehorse, Haru Urara. So in the early 2000s, the Japanese racehorse Haru Urara became something of an international celebrity. This was not because of her prowess on the track. Just the opposite. Haru Urara had never won a race. She was not famous for winning, but for losing. And the longer her losing streak stretched, the more famous she grew. She finished her career with a perversely pristine record of 0 wins and 113 losses. American politics doesn't have anyone quite like Haru Urara, but it does have Beto O'Rourke and Stacey Abrams. The 2 Democrats are among the country's best-known political figures, better known than almost any sitting governor or senator. And they have become so well known, not by winning, but by losing. So they're going on, we got to stop picking losers. That's why we lost, right? The dude says, Beto O'Rourke is also on the WEF Young Global Leaders graduate list. Yeah, the WEF thing, guys, it's boring, right? The WEF thing, like, I agree with a bunch of stupid people, but they're so dumb that it's not, they're not a conspiratorial organization. The WEF is a conference, right? I'm in the conference business with Bitcoin Magazine, and, I looked at a lot of the WEF stuff. I helped arrange for CoinDesk to go. Now, my vision for what CoinDesk was going to do at WEF was totally different, right? My point was to go once, get the press credentials, and just troll them and punk them the whole time, just be irreverent and stupid until they kicked us out, which I thought was a better upside, right? That was before my position with CoinDesk years ago changed. And they went over there and played it straight. They went over to WEF and play it straight now. They like try to report on what's happening and like take it seriously. So it's very different than the vision that I had. But just getting to know the WEF in that process, I found out, it is just a conference, right? And the way it works, the way it functions, I learned a lot about it because there was stuff I wanted to copy, right? It's a successful conference, that's for sure. But and I definitely wanted to avoid the mistakes that they made. But they had, a couple of ways to configure the thing that were clever. They get these companies to pay them just to be a member to help write the agenda, right? And then they give them speaking slots. And it's like, well, that could be a way to make money. But I've met a lot of these people. Like they had the WEF office in New York. I used to talk with them. These are all exactly as you would imagine. People with too many degrees that are as dumb as their degrees suggest they are, right? So, I mean, we can worry about the WEF. It's become sort of shorthand, so I don't mind it, right? I don't like, I play into it. I'll say, oh, that's a WEF person too and all that. But just as a matter of your own worrying about the world and what you're thinking about and all that stuff, that WEF thing, it's a waste of time, right? It's just a waste of time. Like there's nothing there, right? There's nothing there. It's just a bunch of know-it-alls that think their thing is worth something and they get together. I predict it's just going to fall apart on its own. Now, are there seriously bad people involved? Yeah. I don't think Schwab and all these guys have anything good about them. But I don't, that part's separate, right? That part's separate. They use the WEF for a lot of stuff, and everyone knows they use the WEF for, projecting the right kind of leaders. But as we know, they make mistakes. They got a guy like Beto O'Rourke, right? How smart can they be if they think Beto O'Rourke can help them? I'm trying to promote Bitcoin. You think I'm going to say, oh, Beto O'Rourke can help me, right? If Beto O'Rourke got into Bitcoin, I would have questions about Bitcoin, right? Like, honestly, but it's not going to happen. But, this is not a person who I think many people are following. As The Atlantic said, losers, right? Losers. So here's another one of Fetterman. So Fetterman. This is the Pennsylvania guy again. He's the one that they put his brain on TV because it's broken, right? So they'll get like the doctor and they have a model of a brain. It doesn't work there, and it doesn't really work there, and it doesn't really work there. So what he said yesterday is, I mean, it's hard to laugh at a guy who's got mental problems, but it's important, right? We got major trouble in America, and there's major trouble in the world. We got to, it's the Jordan Peterson thing. We got to clean our room, right? Fetterman not cleaning his room. Here's what he says: I run on Roe v. Wade. I celebrate the demise of Roe v. Wade. Now, I think it's true. I think they are celebrating the demise of Roe v. Wade. Why not? Like, it gets it back into the news. It makes it an election issue. So, of course, we're going to talk about how that's actually a thing, right? You want problems to be there so you can work on solving them and get, basically victim points, right? You want to have that. Here's another amazing one. This is from MSNBC. Like, this is what's so different about what's happened the past couple of days. Normally, it's in each team and tribe. We talk about a lot the fake prison of two ideas, the binary of red and blue, and Democrat and Republican in America, and how information rarely travels between either end of these extremes. And it's rare that fire comes across the lines and people hear something from the other side, right? But it happened. So the governor of New York was also in a big race, which is really important for Bitcoiners, right? So Tuesday night for the election on Bitcoin Magazine, we're going to have an election hangout session. We're going to run it on the Bitcoin Magazine channels. We're going to follow the races that are relevant for Bitcoin and try and give a home for Bitcoiners watching the election so they don't have to watch it through the lens of a Democrat or Republican, a conservative or a progressive or any of that stuff. We're just going to be looking at it, each individual race and how it relates to Bitcoin. But one of the big ones is New York State, because the current governor hasn't been very friendly to Bitcoin. And we don't like that, right? We don't like that. Republican or Democrat. If anyone's not friendly to Bitcoin, we got to go take that seat, right? For now, while politics remain sort of important. So this lady who took over, if you remember, the Cuomo brothers, and then you had Mario Cuomo and Chris Cuomo, who was a CNN guy, and then the governor of New York was his brother, and they used to do COVID stuff on TV, and it was funny and this and that. But then he got into some Me Too trouble, and they kicked him out, right? So they put this woman in charge, but she's no good. She's terrible, right? And people hate her. So she's on MSNBC yesterday, and she's going on again about all these images of crime in New York. And I will say, I was in New York 2 weeks ago, safer than I had predicted. If you only watched Republican news, you'd think everyone's dying. The numbers are terrible, right? So I don't think I should, I don't think the reality of the murder rates, the gun violence and all that is fake. I was just surprised that the city was in better shape than I had left it in 2020, and better shape than a lot of cities that I saw, like Toronto, even in 2021. Toronto's doing great now after COVID, and they've stopped the lockdowns and things look normalish. But I was pretty surprised. In New York, totally normal, right? So this governor was trying to say, oh, it's just the news, right? And it's not true. The numbers say it's true, right? My personal experience was I saw crazy stuff in the subway. The subway looked a little weird, not busy, which makes it more dangerous. But I was pretty comfortable in the city, and it felt fine, right? But what she's saying is the news was all fake about it. But here's the thing: the MSNBC commentator, right, questioning her, says the following. She just goes at her, right? That's not propaganda. We don't feel safe. And she comes out and says it out loud. We're worried we could be the next San Francisco. The governor wasn't expecting this, right? And she's already got these like really painted on eyebrows that are always like surprised and up. They didn't really go higher when they said it. She was trying to be like, oh, but then she just couldn't speak, and it really stunted her, right? So here's the thing. I do want to know how many people we're going to see bawling their eyes out on Tuesday night. I'm looking forward to some real waterworks. I want to see crying. I want to see more freakouts than we saw in the 2016 election. I'm in it for the freakouts, right? I want to see people losing it. And why? I don't want people to be upset and angry, but the part about losing it is important because it can open the mind to a new reality, which I think is really good, right? So we want some shock. We want some real despair from people who had a lot of faith and trust in the political system. And it looks like its capacity to do those things is working itself out, and could open up a lot of minds to Bitcoin. So let's talk about Twitter. Lots going on over there. Everyone freaking out as well, right? It's not just elections. Twitter has everyone really, really angry. And a few things. So all these people who said they were going to leave, right? All these people who said they're going to leave Twitter. We don't want to be there anymore. No good. They're all trying to go to Mastodon, right? Mastodon. And if you don't know what Mastodon is, it's a little bit like discourse, right? It's different servers and different rules and all these things. So people can't figure it out, right? They don't really have the technical skills. So everyone's saying, I can't do this. This is too complicated. So it looks like that avenue is closed and not that many people are actually quitting. But it looks like the advertisers are. So we've been following this advertising war against Twitter and what's going on. We mentioned Mike Solana's article. He predicts that this is all-out war, right? That it's going to amplify, it's going to accelerate, it's going to continue to level up every time. And right now it's United Airlines. So I'm done. I'm boycotting United Airlines now. I'm not going to fly with them. So they're going to suspend advertising on Twitter among growing fear that misinformation and hate speech would be allowed to proliferate on the platform under Elon Musk's leadership. Of course, this is from the New York Times, right? The New York Times publishing that United Airlines joins with Pfizer. Pfizer, right? Pfizer. We love Pfizer. What a loss. What a loss. No more Pfizer ads. So United Airlines joining in. Here's what Elon said. He's going to do a thermonuclear name and shame. Remember the name and shame. It's part of our theme today, right? Name and shame. So a thermonuclear name and shame. Well, they have a lot to be shamed about, right? There's other stories here. There's the ongoing story about how Twitter was selling blue checks, right? Selling blue checks for $15,000. So There was all kinds of black market dealing in Twitter blue checks. And it looks like Elon Musk has noticed. So this is from the Wall Street Bets chairman saying Twitter employees were selling verification for upwards of $15,000. For certain accounts, mine included, they would refuse to verify you through the standard application and then privately offer to verify you for money behind the scenes. Investigation needed. Elon Musk replied to the tweet and said, yep. So looks like we're going to get more news into that. Cernovich mentions that the Twitter layoffs, ironically, is the first transparency we've ever had around Twitter and what they were doing. Entire teams coordinating with the UN on what's acceptable for Americans to say. Right? That was actually happening. They were actually coordinating with the UN. And Eliza Bleu, she spells it French. She's a great follow on Twitter. She's a human trafficking, sex trafficking victim. So I don't know if any of you ever follow the absolutely grotesque stories out of England and Britain about the human trafficking rings. We're not going to spend. It's too terrible to talk about on a pleasant. We're drinking coffee and talking about Bitcoin and the sunrise and soon Adam and Eve and Twitter. It's really dark stuff. So we're not going to talk too much about it. And we'll have a sip just to rinse our palate a bit. But you should follow her because she's got the gruesome details. All right, Eliza. So, and this is her whole purpose on Twitter, right? This is all she does, right? So she comes out and now the UN, right? So we got the New York Times running this. We got Cernovich mentioning that they were with the UN, right? And that there was a woman who was crying, oh, I did the UN thing with Twitter and I got fired, right? She was one of these accounts that shared her personal employment status. So the UN also came out yesterday. This is from Reuters. The UN urges Musk to safeguard human rights at Twitter. Right. So Eliza Bleu comes out and does the yes, please, but also you, the UN. And she refers back to the 2017 article that a lot of people refer to because it's never been dealt with. AP exclusive. UN child sex ring left victims, but no arrests. Right. So they've never even followed up. Right. I've never seen them followed up. Right. I've never seen them follow up. The dude says no naked people walking around in New York City. Yeah, there was naked, but those are before, right? That's fine. Elon is not the advocate of free speech we want. He's already talking about having people be payment verified and suppressing tweets from non-paying users. Yeah, Justin, I'm not. My feeling always about Elon Musk is let him do his thing, right? I have enough confidence and trust that whatever he's doing is going to inch us forward. Now, you might want to, I'll use a football analogy because it sounds like the Maxwell trial, no logs. So, like a football analogy, we want to see the touchdown pass, right? But sometimes you got to, it's Sunday, right? In America, the way football works as opposed to rugby, you get to play, you can throw the ball, right? The quarterback can throw the ball like the Tom Brady guy, but he can hand it to a running back, right? And the running guy, usually only gets a couple of yards, right? And the throws are for a lot more. But you can't get the long throw unless you do some running plays, right? You got to trick the audience trick the defense into lining up to stop a run. A run can be really effective if everyone's backed up to stop receivers in a throw, but you got to get them off balance. That's the whole game of football right there, right? Get them off balance and do your thing. So, I tend to put Elon Musk in that category of quarterback, and he's calling his own plays, more or less, right? So that's another football analogy for American football. For you who are not American, the quarterback is sort of the general. It's a very, very warlike, very war-oriented game of football. The quarterback is the general. But normally the quarterback takes orders in his helmet from a microphone or they use notes and code names on a armband where they can sort of refer to it and hide it and close it and all that stuff. Now, the best quarterbacks like Tom Brady, only a few, right? Not every quarterback. If you're young, your coach is telling you everything, you're a robot. But the best get to call their own plays. They just do what they feel is right. And the coach generally looks at them as another coach, right? They're a separate entity. So I tend to use that frame for Elon. So I agree, he said some stuff and this and that, but I think, in general, he's on our team, and our team is still very large, right? It has people who, exactly as Justin said, he's not the advocate of free speech, an absolutist advocate of free speech like Bitcoiners want, but it's still in the right direction, right? Like, we have to think of general direction still. We're still at the point where if it's just moving the energy, the attention, the whole system is moving in the direction that's good for Bitcoin, then we encourage it, right? So it might not be perfect, but at least it's in the direction that will be helpful to us. So that's how I intellectualize it. And I tend to not really worry about what Elon says or does, or, even with the Dogecoin stuff, I don't care. Like, I never have cared, right? I don't care. Like, promote Dogecoin if you want, right? I continue to believe the whole attitude Bitcoiners should take to the whole shitcoins, Ethereum is the following. We want to get rid of, ultimately, and this is where I'm at. I'm sick of the best and brightest in our society going where they make the most money, logically, into the fiat depths of the financial engineering and all the other stuff. And, I think that Ethereum people and all these guys are absolutely in that direction. They're adding even more complexity, right? They're adding even more. Now you got to run nodes to participate, to be able to front run or back run and be able to scam the other financial engineers. To be a better financial engineer, you actually have to do computer science engineering now. So they've added on this other layer. So I kind of love the fight of analog bro Wall Street people getting rug pulled and outsmarted by node running computer science bros, right? I like that fight, because ultimately what we want is for them all to go away. We want the best and brightest to be farmers again. We want the best and brightest to be craftsmen again. We want the best and brightest to be artisans and doing things that are useful for society. No more financial engineering. But if Bitcoiners really want to change it, well, the best way is to have Ethereum eat the whole goddamn pie. Let them take the whole thing down. We got to pump it up. We got to ride it. Let's go, right? I'm a 4 more years of Biden guy, right? 4 more years. Biden 2024. Just like I'm a go Ethereum. Right? Let's pump it up. Let's go, right? More. Because ultimately, we got to take it all down. So you might as well use it as a great big bubble to blow the whole thing up. Why do I want a bunch of people that also have some Bitcoin and other stuff and know about it and are into it to be wiped out? I'd rather go get the actual bros, right? I'd rather them get canceled. And then the other things fall apart, then we don't need that much financial engineering, and everything is within Bitcoin, right? It's the most perfect collateral, right? That's what you have to do with, even legally, right? By the way, when you have collateral, it's called perfection of collateral. You perfect it by using its attributes to use it as collateral so that it can be traded and all those things. Bitcoin, that's why Michael Saylor does a speech perfecting money, right? It's not because he liked the word perfection, right? Perfection is a financial term. It really is a financial term. When you go to a pawn shop and you give them something, right? That's called the perfection of your collateral. Now, there's all kinds of paper documents and unnecessary stuff and all that, right? But it's an important financial transaction. It's not rehypothecation, right? It's not fiat fractional reserve lending. The perfection of collateral is what debt is supposed to be based off of, not the fiction of imagination, right? It should be based off of the perfection of collateral. So that's the big problem, right? So I say pump it up. 4 more years of Biden. Let's ride Ethereum. Let's go, right? Let's go. Inevitably, it's going to go away, right? Inevitably, but not tomorrow. And if it's on Ethereum, I don't care if I don't care if Ethereum gets beaten by another coin. That's all the same game, right? I don't care. Like, let that happen too. If you got a real problem with Ethereum, then just hope Solana beats it, right? Just hope it beats it, and it will. I think it will. Big announcement on all of those other shit coins the past couple of days. Things are going great for them, right? Let them go. Let them have it. Let them have it. It's fun, right? It's fun. We're not going to get the full Bitcoin thing tomorrow, and we do got to get the financial engineers out of there, right? So why not let the computer engineer, financial engineer people beat them? That's all I'm saying, right? That's all I'm saying. If it all goes another way, that's okay too. Now we can say, was looking good, then there comes Corey. Yeah, FTX was always a mess. I was, when I worked at Kraken, I had a pretty good sense of the risks they were taking. And that was kind of my job, was to sort of understand basically the risk assessment, the cost benefit analysis of a bunch of products in the marketplace and what our competitors are doing. And FTX was always the one where I would say, I don't know how they're doing this. Like, I wouldn't do it because I can't even reverse engineer what it is they're doing. They're either using funny money or they're doing enough for me to know that I wouldn't put money into them ever, right? I don't mind giving. I buy Bitcoin on Square, right? Sometimes, right? I like it. I love it, right? The simple, easy. I take it off, of course, but it's a fine platform, and I don't worry about their insolvency. They had just had an amazing earnings report the other day, but the others I would never. Right? Kraken, easy, because I know what's going on there. I know what their risks are. I know what their risk tolerance is, and it seems like to me, anyone who was inside, it was great. Right. But the other ones, when I would look, BlockFi, I knew immediately. I mean, I made a report for the bosses at Kraken in December 2020, and I said, BlockFi ain't going to make it. Like, this is done. Right. It ain't going to make it. So I was right. Right. I was right. Celsius, easy to call. I could call Celsius before I even saw the numbers. I was able to call Celsius was a scam working in events because Alex, whatever their CEO was, would never buy sponsorships, right? He would never buy sponsorships, but he would try to speak. We never sold speaking anyway, right? But he would always say to me, if I buy a sponsorship, can I speak? As if like people would buy it, right? And I said, well, at CoinDesk, we can't do that, right? We can't sell speaking, especially in the early days when it was all editorial driven. I said, it's not possible. Like, you're crazy. I will never do that, right? So what he used to do is he used to hire. And we would ban booth babes. We didn't allow booth babes at our events in CoinDesk. He'd hire booth babes and make them sit on the street outside. And so I would tour you tour your own event, right? He'd be outside of our events with booth babes. All of it not allowed, right? All of it to get around the rules. I wouldn't make an issue about it, but that was enough to make me know he was a scammer. He wasn't even listening to the simplest instructions possible. The simplest instructions possible. No booth babes. You can't buy a speaking slot. You can convince me why I should put you on stage, but all you're doing is giving me scammy reasons. I'll buy a booth. I'll do, like, I don't care. It doesn't move the needle. You pay $10,000 to someone and I'm indebted to you? No, that's not how it works, right? And that's never how it's worked. It doesn't work like that at Bitcoin Magazine. It doesn't work like that at CoinDesk. It doesn't work like that at any of the big events, even though there might be a perception that it does work like that. People like myself who do content for editorial driven shows can tell sponsors, the salespeople who take the money from sponsors to, GTFO easily. And we do almost all the time, right? This person, they want to buy a booth, but they really think they're a good speaker. Will you just look at it, right? Well, I'll look at it, but it won't sway me, right? It won't sway me. I would look at something if someone really begged me anyway. I would just look, right? They don't have to pay anything for me to just look. But in the case of Celsius and BlockFi, I knew from the start, right? It was just so obvious, right? Just so obvious. So there it is. So lots happening at Twitter, right? Follow Eliza Bleu and all the other stuff. Okay, so the reason I brought up a bit of that stuff on shame is to get to the Adam and Eve story, right? Adam and Eve. So turns out yesterday, a fellow named Max Blumenthal, right? So let's even back up one step. The Pasternak fella, right? What was his name again? Corey Pasternak? The trainer, the fella who was training Kanye and Lizzo and a bunch of other people. And then we talked yesterday about how he had connections to PsyOps, and he was not even close to a personal trainer. And we read the quote, right, where it's, I'm going to have you institutionalized again, right? And playtime with your kids won't be the same after that. Like Harley, there you go. Harley Pasternak. So still haven't heard a denial. So I noticed when I re-listened to the show yesterday that I said I verified stuff. I verified this stuff exists. I did not verify he went there. So I just want to make that clear, right? But I've still not seen any refutation. I have not seen any denials. I have not seen anyone say that's a fake news story. And I don't think Kanye has ever been known lie in a text message, right? So I'm more and more treating this text message as real, and the Harley Pasternak story as real. Now, it could still all be fake, right? On this show, I'm going to do my best to not spread fake news. That's why I re-listen and make sure I get it right, because I don't want to be one of these people who jumps on a story, blah, 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 fake, and then just never goes back and corrects the record, right? So far, I'm correct about what I said yesterday, but I want to add the detail that when I said I checked it, I checked only that this stuff existed, right? That the department exists, which it does. I do not know if Harley Pasternak was there, but I am still yet to see any denial, and it still looks as authentic, right? I think it's authentic, right? I think it's authentic. It might not be, and I'll say that every time about something in Ukraine, right? It's fog of war right now. You can trust very little news, right? Nothing out of Ukraine or Russia should ever be trusted, even from me. Nothing on vaccines and medicine and science around that should be trusted, even from me. I'll do my best to show you why I don't like it, why I'm questioning it, but I don't know the answers. I just don't know the answers, right? So Russia, Ukraine, everything I say, my sources are as garbage as anyone else's, right? There are no good sources. So there aren't. You can do your best. I talk to real people there. I do my best. It's the same on the vaccine stuff, right? And then finally, on Kanye, I don't know. It looks like I'm right. It looks like I'm right. So Max Blumenthal, whose father, Sid Blumenthal, was a Clinton. Team Clinton, right? Big time Team Clinton. But Max took a different trajectory in his life. He's been mostly one of these, so he's Jewish. It's important for the story, right? But he's been one of these anti-Zionist Jewish folks, right? So that's fair game, right? I don't want to mischaracterize Max Blumenthal at all. I think I would have disagreed with Max Blumenthal many times in my life, but here I'm agreeing with him. Okay. And what we're going to do is talk a little bit about Max Blumenthal's sources, where his point is coming from, and where and how Bitcoin fits in. So Max Blumenthal came out and said, "We white American Jews are living through a golden age of power, affluence, and safety. Acceptance of this welcome reality threatens the entire Zionist enterprise, from lobby fronts like the ADL to the State of Israel, because Zionism relies on Jewish insecurity to justify itself. Kyrie and Kanye do not threaten American Jews in any concrete way. Zionist pressure groups like the ADL know this, but must seek out any opportunity to justify their own existence by conjuring the specter of existential doom. Jewish paranoia and black humiliation is the result." So Max Blumenthal here basically saying, a bit like what we were saying with the Greta stuff and the environmental stuff, if the grift is get people angry, get them upset, and then you get your benefits, right? A lot like what we said with the Democrats earlier. It's democracy is that threat. The election, democracy is on the ballot. This like very loose, jelly, slimy thought that's hard to really get in your mind, right? So, and same with global warming. Right? Same with global warming. If you're not worried about catastrophism, if you don't think it's a crisis, then it's just some policy measures that could make energy more efficient and a few other things, right? So totally different, right? So that's what's going on. So Max Blumenthal wrote a book called Republican Gomorrah, and this is one of his main intellectual planks that he's on, right? And this is what it's about. Republican Gomorrah, Inside the Movement That Shattered the Party, from 2009. Was a bestseller in the Los Angeles Times, New York Times bestseller list. The work was inspired by psychologist Eric Fromm, who analyzed the personality of those eager to surrender their freedom via an identification with authorian causes and powerful leaders. For Blumenthal, a culture of personal crisis has defined the American radical right. So personal crisis, what he's basically saying is, why do people join these groups, right? Why do people join authoritarian groups? Why do people like authoritarian politics? What's the reason, right? Well, his teacher, in this case, was, Eric Fromm had long died, but his work on social psychology is really important for this. So Eric Fromm tied it to the Adam and Eve story. He was a practicing Jew was involved in the World War II debacle and Holocaust and all the terribleness, and saw everything up front, had a front row seat to it all, right? Had a front row seat to all of it. And here's what he did. He used the story of Adam and Eve as an allegorical explanation for human biological evolution and existential angst, asserting that when Adam and Eve ate from the tree of knowledge, they became aware of themselves as being separate from nature while still being part of it. This is why they felt naked and ashamed. They had evolved into human beings conscious of themselves, their own morality, and their own powerlessness before the forces of nature and society, and no longer united with the universe as they were in their instinctive pre-human existence as animals. According to Fromm, the awareness of a disunited human existence is a source of guilt and shame. And the solution to this existential dichotomy is found in the development of one's unique human powers of love and reason. So that's the lesson for the day, right? The lesson for the day is, you know, and I've often thought this, like, even just from a physical evolutionary point of view, forget about the emotional point of view, right? Take the Adam and Eve story. Take the Adam and Eve story. And this is from Joseph Campbell. Joseph Campbell tells the story. Joseph Campbell is the man who wrote the book, The Hero with a Thousand Faces and the Monomyth, which is where Star Wars, the original Star Wars, not the Disney one, came from, which is where the myth comes from. It's sort of a blueprint of stories and myth and all that stuff. And if you don't know who Joseph Campbell is, go read this stuff because it's brilliant, right? Early Disney used his writings as a manual for The Lion King. Early Disney, 90s Disney, 80s Disney used his manual. Once they saw Star Wars was successful, they wondered how George Lucas did it, and they found out it was this professor, Joseph Campbell, and his teachings and his books and all this stuff. So what he explains in his stories is that from the Adam and Eve point of view, from the evolutionary biology point of view. So the difference between an animal and a human, for example, right? An animal understands death, right? It understands death. You hear elephants crying. You hear about animals sad when an animal, one of their family members is gone, right? All that's there. The emotions of animals are there. What he said was humans were the first to look at a dead body and ask, where did it go? What happened, right? And that very act communicated an unseen dimension, right? That they knew something left the dead body and went to an unseen dimension. And the very consideration of an unseen dimension, beyond the emotional crying and wailing and being sad, right? That is what led to literacy. It's the bite of an apple, right? The knowledge of death, right? The knowledge of life and death. And once you bite the apple, then you realize there's more to it all. And then you have to contemplate all this stuff. And therefore, there is now this psychological world that you're starting to populate and define and try to explain as best you can. And so you can see it sort of through an invisible layer, but you can't touch it. And it's your job to describe it. And so Joseph Campbell said that's the yearning goal of all artists, is to continue that hint that they got from Adam and Eve and the apple, and to define and explain this unseen dimension. So it's the lack of connection and unity to it that is the problem, right? And when humans realize that they're fallen and not part of this unitary group, that everyone is on their own trying to see that unseen dimension and how much of it is really there, and trying to describe it to other people, and not everyone agrees what's there, and that's the source of all conflict, basically, right? The source of all conflict. So what Blumenthal and this other fella are saying from is that that split basically brought guilt and shame, and the only way through is to bring things together again, right? So my argument always remains that the formula of infinity over 21 million is the answer to that. It's literally the answer. Because once you can start counting everything in the world, you don't even need to have the same language again, right? Just that numbers are enough to describe things to each other and communicate truth, as simple as it might be, right? As simple as it might be, things happening over time, right? It's the force that can bring us together again, and it can bring like a psychological unity that is required to build the future. And that's why I always say that Bitcoiners have a major advantage, just like we could predict COVID was coming, not the virus part, but the trouble, the trouble. As crazy as it was to say in 2019, we were saying it out loud. Something big's about to break. We didn't know about the health stuff, right? We just said something big it has to break. Otherwise, Bitcoiners win today, and that was 2019, right? If it all became real, if the financial market wasn't a pornography in 2019, we would have won then, right? But it is a porno. It is not real. There's no real risk, right? But remember, we're going to teach them what it's like for real, right? For real. No more porno on Wall Street. The real thing. The real thing. So that's it, right? It comes from being able to count again and being able to agree that everything in the universe can be measured by 21 million, divided by 21 million, right? So that's what we got. The dude says I have integrity. Well, we try. We're Bitcoiners. We would be the same shame that was described by Blumenthal and not being in unity is almost already there within the Bitcoin world, right? If you in the Bitcoin world break off, right, with some other wild idea that doesn't help promote this, every day that Bitcoin survives, it's stronger. If you're not contributing to the survival and trying to block attacks, it's already a bit weird because why would you start over? Why would you launch another coin to start over when this one still hasn't been broken? If it breaks, we got to start over, right? 100%. If it breaks, we got to start over. But it hasn't broken. So this appetite for everyone to join Bitcoin to, support it, strengthen it, increase its capacity is similar to what we saw with the fall of the Garden of Eden, right? So we got to make Bitcoin the money of Eden, right? That's the only way. It's the money we would use in Eden, right? There you go. All right, team. Sunday morning. Enjoy the rest of your day. I'm doing more fun stuff. It's a nice autumn day, not too many plans. Hanging out with the kids. All right, team. Peace.